Power doesn't really change people. It reveals them. It shows the truth behind the smiles, the speeches, and the carefully chosen words. When you finally reach that place you've been working toward, the corner office, the recognition, the respect, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. People start treating you differently. They nod before you finish your sentence. They agree even when you're wrong. They laugh at jokes that aren't funny. And slowly, if you're not careful, the world begins to bend around your opinion. That's the quiet danger of power. It doesn't come crashing in with noise. It creeps in silently, disguised as success. You start believing that you're the reason everything works, that without you, the system would fall apart. It feels good, intoxicating even. But in that very moment, something begins to shift inside. You start to lose touch with the humility that once fueled your growth, the gratitude that once grounded your choices, the empathy that once guided your leadership. The real test of power isn't how much control you gain. It's how much of yourself you can keep while holding it. Because power has this strange ability to amplify everything inside you. If you're kind, it makes you more generous. If you're arrogant, it magnifies your ego. It's not the throne that corrupts. It's the illusion that you no longer need anyone else to sit upon it. Think about it. How many leaders started out passionate, humble, driven by purpose, and somewhere along the way lost that spark? They began with a mission to make things better, but ended up protecting their image more than their integrity. The applause got louder, the mirrors disappeared, and truth became optional. That's the silent erosion of character that power can bring. The higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes, not just literally, but emotionally. There are fewer people who will tell you the truth. Fewer who will remind you where you came from, and fewer moments where you stop long enough to remember why you started climbing in the first place. Yet the greatest leaders, the ones who last, who inspire beyond their lifetime, are those who never let success harden their humanity. They remain curious, grateful, and connected to something larger than themselves. They know that leadership is not about being served, but about serving something greater. A vision, a cause, a community, a purpose. Every position of power comes with a mirror and a magnifier. The mirror shows you who you are. The magnifier shows everyone else. And if you don't pause to look closely, you might start believing in the reflection that others create for you, not the truth that lives within you. So, when life finally gives you influence, authority, or a platform, pause for a moment. Listen to the silence between the praises. Ask yourself, who am I becoming as I rise? Because the climb doesn't just take you higher, it tests whether your feet can still touch the ground. Power, success, recognition. They're all magnets for admiration, but they're also traps for the ego. The higher you rise, the more tempting it becomes to believe that you've outgrown the basics. Listening, humility, gratitude. But the truth is, those basics are what built you in the first place. Staying grounded isn't just a moral choice, it's a survival strategy for the soul. Because no matter how powerful you become, the moment you lose your connection to your purpose and your people, you begin to lose yourself. Staying grounded matters because leadership at its core isn't about authority. It's about alignment. Alignment with your values, with your team, with the truth of why you started. When leaders lose that alignment, power stops being a force for creation and becomes a force for corruption. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It happens quietly, like dust gathering on something once shining. You start prioritizing appearances over authenticity. You begin managing perception instead of nurturing connection. And before long, you're no longer leading from the heart. You're performing leadership from the ego. The danger of power is not that it turns us into someone else. It's that it convinces us we're untouchable. It whispers that our instincts are always right, our decisions beyond question. That illusion is seductive and deadly. Because when you start believing you're the smartest person in the room, you stop learning. And when you stop learning, you stop growing. That's when leadership dies. Not with a failure, but with a quiet disconnection from reality. Staying grounded keeps you connected to what truly matters. The mission, not the mirror. The purpose, not the praise. The people, not the pedestal. Grounded leaders remember that success isn't owned, it's rented. And the rent is due every single day in the form of self-awareness, gratitude, and humility. Think about it. What do people remember most about great leaders? It's rarely their power, it's their presence. It's how they made others feel valued, heard, and seen even when they didn't have to. The grounded leader doesn't need to remind people of their position. Their impact speaks louder than their title ever could. And here's the paradox. The more grounded you are, the more powerful you become. Not in the sense of control, but in influence, because people can feel authenticity. They can sense when a leader is genuine versus when they're performing. Authenticity builds trust, and trust builds legacy. That's the invisible currency of leadership, the kind that doesn't fade when the applause ends. But staying grounded isn't easy. It requires constant reflection. It demands that you keep your heart open when the world starts closing in. It asks you to remember your roots when the view from the top is intoxicating. It's easy to get lost in success because success is loud. It celebrates the visible. Staying grounded is quiet. It honors the invisible. It's in the way you treat people who can't offer you anything. It's in how you respond when no one's watching. It's in your willingness to listen when others are too afraid to speak. There's something profoundly human about humility. It reminds us that no matter how far we go, we're all works in progress. That realization keeps us teachable, and teachability is the foundation of every lasting legacy. Once you stop learning, you start leading from habit, not purpose. You start repeating what worked before instead of discovering what could work now. When leaders stay grounded, they create cultures that breathe. Their teams feel safe to take risks, to question ideas, to bring their whole selves into the mission. But when leaders let power harden them, fear replaces trust, and silence replaces creativity. A grounded leader builds bridges, a detached leader builds walls, and those walls eventually become prisons for themselves and everyone around them. The irony of power is that the more you cling to it, the less influence you actually have. Real authority doesn't come from position, it comes from permission. People give you that permission when they trust you, when they know you see them not as tools, but as human beings with dreams, fears, and potential. And that trust is only earned by staying grounded in empathy. Grounded leadership is not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less often. It's not self-deprecation, it's self-awareness. It's the discipline of keeping your ego in check so your wisdom can lead, because ego reacts, but wisdom reflects. Ego wants to be right, but wisdom wants to do right. And that difference defines whether your leadership lasts beyond your lifetime or ends with your title. There's a reason why some of the most admired leaders in history radiated calm in the face of chaos. They weren't detached, they were centered. They led from a place of clarity, not control, because staying grounded gives you emotional balance. When you're grounded, praise doesn't inflate you, and criticism doesn't destroy you. You stop chasing validation because you're anchored in purpose. And that's why grounded leadership is so rare. It's not something you achieve once and keep forever. It's a daily practice. It's asking yourself, am I still the person I promised to be when I started? Am I leading for the right reasons, or am I being led by my pride? Am I surrounding myself with people who tell me what I need to hear, or only what I want to hear? These questions don't weaken you. They refine you. They keep you honest, humble, and human. Staying grounded matters because power without humility becomes empty. Influence without empathy becomes manipulation, and authority without gratitude becomes arrogance. True strength is not about standing above others, it's about standing with them, even when you could choose not to. The most powerful people aren't those who rise above the crowd. They're the ones who stay connected to it. They never let titles create distance between them and the truth. They understand that leadership is not a crown you wear, but a responsibility you carry. It's not about having followers. It's about inspiring others to lead alongside you. So, why does staying grounded matter? Because in a world that measures success by how high you climb, it takes real wisdom to remember what keeps you steady when the winds of praise or pressure start to blow. Power can make you forget what it felt like to start from nothing. Humility brings that memory back. And in that memory lies your strength, your empathy, and your authenticity. To stay grounded is to remember that no matter how much you achieve, you are still a student of life, of leadership, of love. It's to walk with confidence, but never without compassion. It's to speak with authority, but never without listening. It's to build with ambition, but never without integrity. Because in the end, leadership isn't about how far you rise. It's about how deeply you remain rooted. When you think about true leadership in the modern world, one story stands out as a testament to how humility can transform not only a person, but an entire organization. When Satya Nadella took over as CEO of Microsoft in 2014, the company was facing an identity crisis. It was massive, yes, but it had lost its soul. Bureaucracy had replaced creativity, internal competition had replaced collaboration, and innovation had slowed under the weight of ego and hierarchy. The culture was cold, efficient, but uninspired. Many thought that Microsoft's best days were behind it. Then came a quiet leader who didn't enter with grand speeches or aggressive reforms. He entered with empathy. Nadella didn't start by changing strategies. He started by changing mindsets. He began by listening, really listening, to his employees, to customers, to the marketplace, to the whispers of frustration within the company walls. And what he discovered wasn't a lack of intelligence or talent, it was a lack of connection. People were afraid to fail, afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to question. They had stopped believing that their ideas mattered. Nadella's first mission wasn't to rebuild Microsoft's products, it was to rebuild its people. He introduced a simple yet powerful concept, the growth mindset. It wasn't new, but under his leadership, it became a living philosophy. He encouraged teams to learn, experiment, and fail forward. He created space for dialogue and difference. He replaced the know-it-all attitude with a learn-it-all culture, and through that humility, the willingness to admit that no one has all the answers, Microsoft rediscovered its heartbeat. But what makes Nadella's leadership remarkable isn't just his strategy, it's his humanity. He often shares personal stories about his family, his challenges, his experiences as a father of a child with special needs, not to gain sympathy, but to connect on a human level. That vulnerability is his strength. It shows that leadership is not about perfection, it's about presence. His humility doesn't diminish his authority, it amplifies it. Because people don't follow titles, they follow authenticity. Under his leadership, Microsoft didn't just rise financially, it evolved spiritually. Employees began to care again. Teams became collaborative instead of competitive. Innovation returned, not because of fear, but because of trust. The company's market value soared, yes, but its culture healed, and that was the real victory. Nadella's humility created a ripple effect that turned Microsoft from a stagnant giant into a dynamic force once again. The power of humility lies in its quiet influence. It doesn't demand respect, it earns it. It doesn't silence others, it amplifies their voices. When a leader shows they are human, they give permission for everyone else to be human too, to make mistakes, to grow, to evolve. That's the essence of transformational leadership. Nadella proved that empathy and excellence can coexist, that kindness can drive innovation, and that humility can be the strongest form of power there is. The true challenge of leadership begins not when you're struggling to reach the top, but when you finally get there. Success has a way of making the world louder, the praise, the attention, the constant validation. And if you don't have the discipline to stay centered, that noise can drown out the voice of reason within you. Staying grounded when you're in power isn't about resisting success. It's about managing it with grace. It's about holding on to the very principles that helped you rise, even when the world tells you that you no longer need them. The first and most powerful anchor is gratitude. Power can create the illusion that you got here alone, but no one climbs without a ladder, and no ladder stands without support. Gratitude keeps your ego in check. It reminds you of the mentors, the teammates, the family, and even the critics who shaped your journey. When you begin each day by acknowledging those who helped you, you replace entitlement with appreciation. Gratitude doesn't just make you humble. It keeps you human. It turns leadership from a position into a privilege. The second lesson is to surround yourself with truth tellers. The higher you rise, the fewer people dare to tell you when you're wrong. But the strongest leaders are those who create a circle of honesty around them. They value those who challenge their ideas with respect, not those who echo them out of fear. The truth can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for growth. If you only surround yourself with people who agree with you, you're not leading. You're being shielded. Honest voices are the mirrors that prevent you from losing sight of who you are. The third principle is to stay connected to your purpose. Titles, awards, and recognition are fleeting, but purpose is timeless. When your decisions start drifting toward convenience instead of conviction, that's when you know you've lost your grounding. Go back to your why. Why did you start? What mattered to you before the spotlight? When you lead from purpose, your actions align with your values, not your insecurities. Purpose gives direction when success tries to distract you. The fourth key is to listen more than you speak. It's easy to believe that leadership means having all the answers, but true influence comes from asking the right questions. Listening is not a weakness, it's wisdom in action. It shows respect, it builds trust, it reminds your team that their voice matters, and when people feel heard, they give their best. Listening allows you to lead with empathy instead of ego. And finally, lead with service. Power was never meant to be about control, it was meant to create impact. The best leaders use their position to lift others, not to elevate themselves. Service transforms authority into influence. When you focus on helping people grow, success becomes sustainable, not temporary. The measure of a leader's greatness is not how many people serve them, but how many they empower to lead. Staying grounded, then, is not an act of humility alone. It's an act of leadership that ensures your power builds others, not just yourself. Power can take many forms: titles, wealth, fame, recognition, but none of these guarantee real influence. True power isn't about the authority to command, it's about the ability to inspire. The kind of power that lasts doesn't come from control, it comes from connection. Anyone can demand obedience, but only a true leader earns respect. Control might force people to follow rules, but influence makes them believe in a vision. And when people believe, they don't just work for you, they work with you, they work because of you. That's the kind of power that builds legacies, not empires. The temptation of control is always lurking in leadership. When things start to go wrong, our instinct is to tighten the grip, to dictate more, to trust less, to make every decision ourselves. But leadership isn't about how tightly you can hold the reins. It's about how much trust you can place in others to ride beside you. Control limits people. Influence liberates them. Control says, "Do as I say." Influence says, "Let's build this together." One comes from fear, the other from faith. Real leaders understand that power is most effective when it's shared. Influence multiplies when it's given away. When you empower others, you don't lose authority, you expand it. Because every person you lift becomes a reflection of your leadership. They carry your principles into rooms you may never enter, conversations you may never hear, and moments you may never witness. That's the ripple effect of influence. It keeps moving long after you've stepped aside. True power also lies in restraint, the ability to stay calm when others panic, to stay kind when others criticize, to stay humble when others praise you. That's real strength. The world is full of leaders who can speak, but very few who can listen. Full of people who can demand loyalty, but few who can inspire it. Influence is quiet, but powerful. It doesn't seek the spotlight, it becomes the light. When your goal is control, you measure success by compliance. When your goal is influence, you measure it by growth, not just your own, but that of everyone around you. Influence touches hearts, shapes minds, and moves people toward a shared vision. Control might get short-term results, but influence creates lasting change. The greatest leaders are remembered not for what they forced others to do, but for what they inspired them to become. And when you lead through influence, something beautiful happens. People don't just follow you, they begin to lead themselves. They carry your lessons forward, not because they have to, but because they want to. They feel ownership, pride, and purpose. That's when leadership transcends position and becomes a legacy. because true power was never about being in charge. It was about making a difference that continues even when you're no longer there.